Okay, let's dive right into an explainer that has absolutely captivated the unexplained phenomena community. Today we're looking at the house on Maple Hollow Road and exactly what was found in the basement. This isn't just your average creepy old building story. We are unpacking a meticulously documented sequence of events that, honestly, challenges everything we think we know about the spaces we live in. We're going to break down the exact timeline, the physical evidence left behind, and the deeply disturbing history of this property. Let's see how a family's dream of a fresh start turned into an absolute nightmare.
Which brings us to the core mystery. Why would a family just abandon their new home? I mean, abandoned in 3 weeks, it's the Ohio farmhouse no one will completely explain. Think about the logistics of moving for a second. The planning, the money, the sheer physical exhaustion. You don't just walk away from all that on a whim, right? The Hendersons had just bought this quiet farmhouse. They were a totally normal family seeking a quiet life. Yet in less than a month, they hit a psychological breaking point so abruptly and honestly so violently that their departure completely defies logic.
To really grasp the sheer panic of their departure, you have to look at what they left behind. They literally left everything behind, including their dog. Fully furnished rooms, completely untouched. Closets still perfectly packed with their clothes. Now, leaving your stuff is one thing, but leaving behind a beloved, totally dependent family pet, that speaks to a level of primal, blinding terror that completely overrides every single human instinct to pack, prepare, or protect. They weren't just moving out, they were fleeing for their lives.
Let's wind the clock back to October 2016. That's when Mark, Claire, and their 8-year-old daughter Lily were looking for a fresh start in this historic, cheap property. They moved in on a surprisingly warm morning, super optimistic about the future. The house was old, sure, but you know how it goes. The price was just too good to pass up. The realtor vaguely mentioned the place had a bit of history, but kind of played it off as nothing to worry about. Just a charming quirk of rural real estate, right? Well, actually, scratch that, as we're about to see that history was anything but charming.
What absolutely fascinates me about this case is the rapid, terrifying velocity of the escalation. This wasn't some slow burn over months or years. Nope. By night 2, the physical environment is already breached. By week 1, the structural integrity of the home feels compromised by sound. And by week 2, a psychological infiltration happens with the youngest member of the family. The house didn't just haunt them. It systematically dismantled their sense of safety, and it did it with aggressive speed.
Okay, so night 2. Lily wakes up crying, saying someone is standing at the foot of her bed. Now, it starts exactly how countless childhood fears start, right? A kid wakes up in the dark, points at shadows. Naturally, Mark does the protective dad thing, thoroughly checks the room, and finds absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. It would have been so easy to just brush this off as a bad dream brought on by the stress of sleeping in a new house, but when Claire goes in to gently tuck Lily back in, the situation shifts from psychological to physical.
The terrifying reality was that there were muddy tracks proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that someone or something was actually in that room with her. And think closely about the dimensions of these footprints for a second. The tracks led directly from the closet, meaning whatever made them had been waiting inside the room, not sneaking in from the hallway. But the size is the most disturbing piece of data here. Too small to be an adult intruder, but entirely too large to belong to 8-year-old Lily. So no standard home invasion, no sleepwalking. Something else, totally unidentifiable by size, had been standing over their daughter.
By the end of week 1, the auditory anomalies start echoing through the walls, every single night. Mark logically assumes pests, maybe mice or raccoons, and does a thorough sweep of the perimeter and interior walls. But these didn't sound like tiny animal claws. The reports specifically describe the sound as human fingernails dragging against solid wood. And while he's searching for the source of these sounds in the dark basement, Claire stumbles upon something impossible, the carved door in the basement wall.
This raises a deeply unsettling question. Did this creepy little door just appear, or had it been hiding in plain sight the entire time? It wasn't some standard utility access panel. It was a hand-carved wooden door, bizarrely integrated directly into the heavy stone foundation of the house. Tiny too, no bigger than a cat flap. And it wasn't just visually out of place. It emitted this highly localized, distinct stench of wet earth and deep rot. The Hendersons couldn't even agree if it had been there when they moved in, creating an immediate sense of spatial distortion right in their own home.
Mark, trying to take control of the situation, decides to investigate. He carefully opens the small carved door, revealing nothing but pitch blackness and that overwhelming smell of rot. Then, against literally every basic survival instinct, he reaches his bare hand into the void. And then came the physical contact. He didn't just touch something. Something dynamic and alive reached back and made contact with his hand. He violently yanks his trembling arm away and slams the door shut. From that exact moment forward, the family dog would just sit at the top of the basement stairs, staring down and growling at empty air, completely refusing to go anywhere near the basement.
Right after this encounter, things take a much darker turn. Lily began speaking to an unseen friend she explicitly named the Small Man. She claimed he lived behind that little basement door and only came out at night. So, while Mark and Claire are pulling away from the basement in terror, their daughter is actively being drawn toward it. Now, kids having imaginary friends is perfectly normal, especially during stressful transitions like a move. But the hyper-specific details Lily provided, that completely broke the mold of childhood imagination. She wasn't playing with a magical creature. She was communicating with something she clearly understood was tied to the architecture of the basement.
One evening, Claire finds her daughter standing rigidly at the top of the basement stairs. Lily isn't looking at her mom at all. Her eyes are locked entirely on the oppressive darkness below. And in a quiet, matter-of-fact whisper, she says, "He says it's almost time for us to play." She wasn't inviting the entity to play. She was relaying a timeline that had been dictated to her. An invisible countdown had just been triggered.
Mark finally digs into that bit of history the realtor casually mentioned, and the historical records revealed a terrifying parallel. It is truly the house that remembers every family that left. He finds records of a family from the 1800s who lived on this very property. They were the family that vanished from a house that still stands. The entire family disappeared without a single trace or explanation. All of them, except for one, their youngest daughter. She was found completely alone, deeply traumatized, and repeatedly whispering about a small man in the walls. The exact same phrase, separated by over a century. The pattern was undeniable.
Which brings us to the climax, and exactly what lived behind the walls of 214 Maple Hollow Road. On their final night, the isolated scratching sounds didn't just return, they multiplied exponentially. It wasn't just in the basement or Lily's room anymore. The horrible sound of fingernails dragging against wood echoed from inside the walls of every single room in the house simultaneously. Downstairs, that heavy little wooden door in the stone foundation slowly creaked open on its own. And when Mark and Claire rushed to check on Lily, her bed was completely empty.
In a desperate panic, they rushed to the basement. And there, sitting calmly on the cold floor, right in front of the pitch-black opening of that small door, was Lily. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She just looks up at her terrified parents with this calm smile and tells them, "He just wanted to play." That sentence is the haunting crux of the story of the Henderson house. She said, "He gets so lonely." Well, they didn't wait to hear anything else. They grabbed their daughter, ran out the front door, and fled into the night, leaving their entire life and their dog behind forever.
I want you to think about that timeline for a second. 3 weeks, just 21 days. That is all the time it took for an ancient, unseen presence to completely dismantle a modern family's reality. It is a stunningly efficient cycle of terror, and it highlights just how fragile our sense of domestic safety truly is when we're confronted with something that fundamentally violates the rules of the natural world. Today, the farmhouse on Maple Hollow Road sits entirely empty. It hasn't been torn down, it simply waits. The terrifying legacy of the small door is a true fear passed through generations of local Ohio lore. Out of this documented case file, a new superstition was born, knock 3 times, the legend of the Ohio farmhouse. Locals whisper that if you are brave enough to descend into that basement, find the small hand-carved door in the stone foundation, and knock exactly 3 times on the wood.
The biggest takeaway from the Henderson explainer isn't just about ghosts or entities. It's about trusting your human instinct. We have millions of years of evolutionary survival mechanisms hardwired into our brains, guys. If you walk into a room and suddenly feel a deep, inexplicable sense of dread, or if the architecture of a space makes you feel like you are being observed from the dark corners, do not try to rationalize it. Trust your gut. Some doors are meant to be found, and some doors are strictly meant to be left closed.
So, I leave you with this final thought to ponder. If you ever found yourself standing in that cold, damp basement, staring at that tiny wooden door, and you decided to knock 3 times, what exactly do you think is going to knock back? If you have ever experienced something in your own home that completely defies logical explanation, tell us your story down in the comments below. We read every single one, and we use them to guide what we investigate next. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and stay curious.